Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Digital media and technologies do have a dual power and they offer benefits and drawbacks. So it isn't about saying that screens are bad. They definitely have a place in our lives and certainly our children's lives.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Hello, this is Dr. Justin Coulson. I'm the author of all those books about raising happy families. Hopefully your family is happy. I'm here with Kylie, my wife and co-host, and mum to our 6 kids. If there's anything that's going to be causing contention in most Australian homes, in fact, most homes around the world, it's digital stuff. And I'm really excited to welcome back to the podcast a researcher who not only can tell us about the research, but does the research herself. Dr. Amy Graham is a research fellow for the Gonski Institute for Education at the University of New South Wales. Last year, around about this time, phase 1 of the Growing Up Digital Australia report was completed with about 2,000 school teachers and principals. And we had a conversation about that on episode 113. You can go back and listen. We'll link to that in the show notes, looking at teachers' experiences with students' tech use at school and the way technology use was having an impact on students' capacity to learn. Well, Amy joins us again to talk about phase 2 of the Growing Up Digital Australia report. Amy, it's so good to have you back on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me back.
This time we're not talking about teachers' experiences. We're talking about what's happening in the home. You've surveyed something like 2,500 parents and caregivers to ask them what their experiences are when it comes to digital technology use.
Yeah, so this time we had this great snapshot and by accident did it in the COVID times. So we had this great snapshot into Australian homes and I guess the struggles that parents and grandparents are having with managing this digital minefield of young people. So we collected data from, 2,500 parents and grandparents, which represented over 5,000 kids. So it was a really nice, neat snapshot into Australian homes.
Amy, we kind of found out something that most parents don't really want to own up to, but it's a reality and your data showed that parents are worried about this. Parents are owning up to the fact that digital devices have a negative impact in their own lives.
Yeah, I think it's always necessary to start by admitting that we as adults struggle with those very same challenges caused by digital media and technology that our children are. So parent distraction on their smartphones and other devices is becoming increasingly common. And in our research, over 90% of Australian parents felt that they were negatively distracted, and 3 in 4 felt that this was actually growing. So in order to be able to understand the power of these gadgets and how to regulate their own behaviours, I think parents have to change first, because what we know from effective parenting and impactful teaching is that the power of an example is often the most effective way to affect change. And we saw that, we had over 70% of parents recognising that they themselves need to have the right habits to be able to influence their children.
So 90% is a really big number of parents who are saying, yeah, it probably is having a negative impact. And like you said, over 70% thinking something needs to be done about it. Have you got kids?
Yes, I have 3.
And are you part of that 70+% that needs to do something about your digital device usage? I mean, you're researching it, but has it permeated into your life as well?
Oh, I mean, I think we all have, particularly during the COVID time, we all have this different view of screens. They allowed us to do our work. They allowed our kids to engage in learning. They kept us in touch with family and friends. But I think I'm probably more conscious of needing to show my kids explicitly and intentionally how to switch off. So I love my work. My kids know that, but I can put it down at a mealtime and I can put it down when things are important to them. So I think, I think that's probably something that is missing in some homes that really need to be really explicit with children about how to switch off.
You're very good. I'm impressed.
So in the survey, parents are really concerned about digital distractions for kids.
Yeah, thanks, Kylie. I think, we're seeing a younger starting age. So children as young as 4 are owning a screen-based device that belongs to them. And the average in homes is over 3 devices per child. So it's starting younger. Then they're using them a lot and often at the displacement of other activities. So parents are actually feeling that their child can't spend a day without digital technology. The first thing that they do when they're bored is to pick up their phone. And they're concerned that it displaces their opportunity to do other things like being physically active or playing outside or being creative or spending time with others. And then the distraction. Over 4 in 5 parents felt that their child's negatively distracted and that they find it harder to control their child's digital habits since they got that device for them. Then we look at impact, and parents are really concerned that overuse of digital media is negatively impacting on children's physical activity and attention span and interest in playing. We've got impacts on mental health. 37% of parents felt that their child was anxious or depressed because of time online or because they tried to take the phone away. And I think that age matters here. And I think that we need to look at some of the risks and consequences that we see often don't appear till much later in childhood, but the scene's set quite early.
So parents are really stressed around control. It's a really big thing as we talk about, digital distractions. Is it actually doing to our kids the things that parents are most concerned about?
Yeah, or is it just what the survey showed parents are worrying about?
This is parent concerns. So this was a parent survey and it was about their observations of their child and also their own habits themselves.
Well, it seems like screen time and screen issues are really high on the agenda and on the concern list for parents. We're going to come back in just a sec and ask Dr. Amy Graham, a research fellow at the Gonski Institute for Education at the University of New South Wales and one of the lead researchers on the Growing Up Digital Australia report, what we know about kids using devices after bedtime and what's happening in terms of the way that it impacts on their school experience.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
Are screens creating tension at home? Tweens, Teens and Screens is a webinar to guide families to healthy, safe super screen solutions. Buy it today at happyfamilies.com.au/shop.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. We're talking to Amy Graham from the Gonski Institute for Education at the University of New South Wales.
Amy, you mentioned that screen issues change based on the age of our kids.
I think we have to realise that some of the things that we see later in childhood, often the trajectory is set a lot earlier than that. So we have an opportunity to intervene early and set limits. So we know from the best neuroscience in the world that early childhood gives this opportunity for brains to learn twice as fast. And that means that the content that children of, 2 to 5 years old, the content they're receiving is really important. What they're accessing really matters. But also the messages that they're receiving around digital usage at this time and how to get a sense of balance and wellness is penetrating a lot more easily than later in life. So if we're introducing screens as a digital babysitter to let parents have a meal in peace or get some time out, that sticks. That's what will be absorbed. Then at primary school age, we're seeing, children of 5 to 12 years old, schools are coming in and trying to flip the script a bit and use these screens for really wonderful learning purposes and accessing a whole new world and experiences that otherwise kids might not be able to. But the limits we're putting on them at this stage are quite arbitrary and they're meaningless to kids. So they're getting really mixed messages at this age. They know that they can use screens for learning. They don't really have any buy-in to the strategies that we're putting on them to regulate them. And they know that they have to be more creative to hide it by this age. So we heard stories about kids that were, taking photos of their homework and then flipping the screen to be able to trick their teachers, putting in dummy phones to avoid the school ban, and parents struggling to know when their kids are actually doing homework because it's all on a screen now. So I think that they get a little bit better at hiding it. Parents are buying the first phone so they can keep in touch with their child on public transport or when they're at school. Parents at this age are also a bit prone to not wanting to say no, not wanting their kids to miss out. So there are a whole range of factors that go into that primary school age and I guess the strategies you need to use at different stages. Then finally, by adolescence, the trajectory is pretty well set. And this is often where the cracks start to appear. So we see sometimes entire groups of young people on their phones, and they take them everywhere. The habit's formed, the distraction's there, and they have very little respite. They're sleeping with them. We're seeing declining mental health and social relationships fracturing at that stage, more fragile self-esteem, and unwillingness to do other activities. And often this is where parents become really concerned, but it's a little bit too late. We need to get in much earlier and teach those skills of self-regulation and monitoring at a younger age.
Amy, something that the report found, and it's kind of crushing to say it, I don't want to say it, but the report showed that there are issues around financial and socioeconomic circumstances, specifically children who come from families where there is a lower income are more likely to have parents who have fewer concerns about digital devices and fewer rules, and are therefore more likely to be dealing with some more of the challenges that we've described.
Yes, and I am really cautious in conveying these findings with sensitivity, because I know that there are some very real challenges facing some families. And the last thing I would want to induce is any feeling of guilt or shame around what their kids are doing on gadgets when they're trying to put food on the table. But the data did show that fewer parents in living in poverty or of low income have the tools that they need to set and consistently reinforce effective limits. So these kids are sleeping with their phones more. They are struggling educationally. They are more likely to be anxious or depressed because of being online or because they weren't allowed to use their devices. And then this is exacerbated by those parents that didn't see the need to be a positive role model as much and implement those effective regulation strategies. They also felt that they had less of an influence, so that when we looked at family income, that actually decreased linearly, suggesting that those more well-resourced parents actually do have a greater awareness of their position as a role model. And I think for a long time, we've thought of the digital divide as the difference between the have and have-nots in terms of access, but that's actually being overcome. And parents who provided their child with a mobile phone was actually highest in the lowest income bracket. So the access issue isn't the greatest digital divide. It's actually the teaching of the strategies and habits. And I think that we can't just accept this as reality. We need to try and help these families, especially in trying to reconceptualise screens less as a digital babysitter, less as a way to pass the time, and more as a learning tool and something to be used with caution and to be used with regulation.
Amy, this has been a really good conversation. I'm wondering if you could tell us what would be your take-home message from the Growing Up Digital Australia report?
I think my key take-home message would be that digital media and technologies do have a dual power, and they offer benefits and drawbacks. So it isn't about saying that screens are bad. They definitely have a place in our lives and certainly our children's lives. But I think the missing piece of the puzzle is this need to teach self-regulation. And we need to be much more explicit in teaching about the risks and negative impacts when these are overused or used in problematic or habit-forming ways. We do this when we teach about smoking or the need to wear a seatbelt, and we teach them that there are natural and preventable consequences. And I think that we need to teach our children how to live their life in ways that feel good, and the importance of getting things like sleep and getting outside and having a balance in each day. But we can't do that by a one-size-fits-all solution. So I think much broader conversations, start a conversation with your kids, get into their world, and keep in mind that what's harmful for some is helpful for others. So not all children will be impacted in the same ways, but we really do need as parents to own responsibility, say no sometimes, and set some limits.
Wow, there's just so much for parents to worry about. And the Growing Up Digital Australia report, while it's got some good news and definitely some signs of awareness, also some things to really challenge us and provoke us to be better. Dr. Amy Graham from the Gonski Institute for Education at the University of New South Wales, thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much for inviting me back.
Really, really important conversation. You can hear our first conversation with Amy on episode 113. And of course, you've just heard the one that we've had now about how parents are struggling with the screen and digital issues that so many devices bring with them. We really hope that you've enjoyed the podcast. It's produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. If you'd like more info about how to make your family happier, specifically how you can manage the screen issues in your home, you might want to check out the Happy Families membership. We've got a couple of great webinars in there that are yours as part of the membership, all about managing and defining the best ways to deal with devices at home. You can get all the information about the Happy Families membership at happyfamilies.com.au.